she had learned very early in life that love inside a family could be the cruelest illusion of all. From the outside, her home looked respectable. A clean house, polite smiles, relatives who spoke softly in public, but behind closed doors, she was invisible, unwanted, tolerated only because blood demanded it. Her father had died when she was young, and with him went the only shield she had against the cold eyes of her mother and the quiet hatred of her siblings. Every meal reminded her she was a burden. Every conversation reminded her she did not belong. They blamed her for everything: the financial struggles, the stress, the arguments, even the grief that never healed. Her mother often looked at her as if she were a mistake that should have been erased long ago. Her brother treated her like a servant and her sister like competition that needed to be crushed. She endured it all silently because she believed patience with strength and kindness would one day soften their hearts. She was wrong. The night everything shattered began like any other night, with accusations flying across the air. Her mother accused her of stealing money she had never touched. Her brother shouted that she was useless and lazy. Her sister laughed as if humiliation was entertainment. She tried to explain, tried to defend herself, but her voice was drowned by anger. Then the words came, the ones that changed her life forever: "Get out. You are no longer part of this family." Her mother pointed toward the door with shaking hands, not from fear but rage. She was given no time to pack, no chance to argue. A small bag was thrown at her feet with a few clothes inside and nothing else. No money, no phone, no documents, just shame and rejection. As the door slammed behind her, the sound echoed like a final verdict. She stood outside, barefoot, under the dark sky, realizing she was completely alone. The streets were empty, but her heart was heavier than the silence. Each step she took felt unreal, as if she were walking through a nightmare she could not wake from. Memories of childhood flickered through her mind, moments when she had hoped things would change, when she had believed family meant safety. Now those memories burned like lies. She slept that night on a cold bench, hugging her bag like it was the last piece of her existence. Hunger clawed at her stomach, but humiliation hurt more. She wondered how people who shared her blood could erase her so easily by morning. She knew one thing: she could either let this break her or she could survive. Survival became her only goal. She searched for work everywhere: washing dishes, cleaning floors, carrying boxes, anything to earn a meal. People looked down on her torn clothes and tired eyes. But she kept going. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. She learned to endure pain without tears and rejection without anger. Fate, however, was watching quietly, waiting for the perfect moment to turn her suffering into power. One rainy evening, exhausted and sick, she collapsed outside its towering building of glass and steel, unaware that behind those walls, decisions worth billions were being made, unaware that this place would mark the beginning of a destiny so powerful that one day the same family who cast her out would kneel before her, begging for mercy. Rain soaked her hair and clothes as she lay on the cold ground outside the massive glass building. People passed by without stopping, their umbrellas tilted away from her suffering. As if pain were contagious, her breath came shallow and her body burned with fever, yet her mind drifted in and out of memories of the home that had rejected her. She remembered her mother's eyes, not sad, not guilty, just relieved, as if throwing her out had lifted a weight. She remembered her sister's smile, sharp and satisfied, and her brother's silence, which hurt more than his insults, because silence meant agreement. When she finally opened her eyes again, bright lights hovered above her, and the smell of antiseptic filled her nose. Panic surged until a calm voice told her to rest. She was in a private hospital room, cleaner than any place she had ever been before. Machines hummed softly and warm blankets wrapped her fragile body. A nurse explained that she had been found unconscious and brought in by a man who happened to be leaving the building late that night. The man paid for everything and left without waiting for thanks. At first she thought it was a dream, but the pain in her body was real, as was the bill she feared she would never afford. Days passed and her strength slowly returned. During that time she kept asking about the man, but no one gave her details. only that he was powerful, busy, and rarely noticed. By the public, when she was discharged, she expected to be handed a bill she could not pay. Instead, she was given an envelope. Inside was money more than she had ever held in her life, and a card with a simple message: take care of yourself and do not waste this chance. No name, no signature, just those words. Something inside her shifted for the first time. Since she had been thrown out, she felt seen. She used the money carefully, renting a tiny room, eating properly, and buying secondhand clothes. She enrolled in free courses, online learning, business, finance, and technology, studying late into the night with a hunger that went beyond survival. She worked during the day and learned at night, slowly building skills and confidence. She failed. Many times rejected from jobs, ignored by employers, mocked for her lack of experience, but she never stopped. Each rejection hardened her resolve. Fate tested her again when the small cafe she worked at shut down without paying her wages. She cried. That night, not from despair, but from exhaustion, yet even then she refused to go back to her family. Pride would not allow it, nor would memory. One afternoon, months later, she received an unexpected email offering an interview at a startup she had applied to long ago. She wore her best clothes, hands shaking, heart racing. The office was inside the same glass building where she had collapsed months earlier. As she entered, memories rushed back, but she stood tall. During the interview, the panel seemed impressed not by her background, but by her ideas, her resilience, her fire. She was hired at the lowest position yet. To her, it felt like a throne. She worked harder than anyone, arriving first, leaving last, absorbing knowledge like air. Her dedication did not go unnoticed. Within a year, she was promoted, then promoted again. People started listening when she spoke, trusting her judgment, respecting her vision. What she did not know was that the mysterious man who had saved her that night was watching her progress closely from the top floor. He had asked for reports on the young woman who refused to quit. The more he learned, the more intrigued he became, because her story mirrored his own rise from nothing. He saw potential not just to succeed, but to dominate. One evening, she was summoned to the executive floor, a place she had never been before. Her heart pounded as the elevator climbed. When the doors opened, she came face to face with the man who had unknowingly changed her fate. The moment their eyes met, she felt it, destiny unfolding silently. And she had no idea that this meeting would unlock secrets about her past, wealth beyond imagination, and a future so powerful it would shake the very people who once discarded her like trash. The room was vast and quiet, filled with soft light and walls of glass that overlooked the entire city. She stood frozen, unsure whether to both speak or turn back. The man before her studied her calmly, his presence heavy yet strangely reassuring. He motioned for her to sit, and only then did she realize her hands were trembling. He told her he remembered the night he found her outside the building, rain-soaked, barely breathing, and how something in her eyes had tainted her, reminded him of himself. Years ago, when he had nothing but stubborn will, he revealed that he was the founder and chairman of the corporation, a man whose name controlled markets and whose decisions moved billions. Yet he spoke without arrogance, as if titles meant little. He said he had been observing her progress, quietly watching her work ethic, her integrity, her refusal to take shortcuts or betray others for gain. He asked about her past, not with curiosity but with respect, and for the first time she told her story without shame. She spoke of betrayal, of being thrown out with nothing, of nights spent hungry and afraid, and of a family that erased her existence. The words flowed freely, as if she had been waiting for someone to truly listen. He did not interrupt. When she finished, he nodded slowly and told her something that made her heart stop. He said the night he found her, he had already planned to retire soon and was searching for someone worthy, not just intelligent, but unbreakable, someone who understood loss and hunger, someone who could protect an empire without becoming cruel. He offered her mentorship, an opportunity that came with pressure, responsibility, and exposure beyond anything she imagined. She accepted without hesitation, knowing this was not luck, but the result of every tear, every sleepless night. Under his guidance, she learned secrets of power, negotiations, acquisitions, strategy, and control. She sat in rooms with executives who underestimated her and watched as she dismantled their arguments calmly, brilliantly. She learned how money truly moved, how influence was built, and how empires were defended. The chairman treated her like family, something she had never experienced. He trusted her instincts even when others doubted. Them in time proved her right again and again. Profits rose, deals succeeded, and her name began circulating quietly among the elite as a rising force. Years passed, and her transformation was undeniable. She dressed with confidence, spoke with authority, and commanded respect, yet she never forgot where she came from. She quietly funded shelters, education programs, and hospitals. Choosing anonymity over praise, one evening, the chairman fell ill suddenly and was hospitalized. Doctors whispered, and uncertainty filled the halls. He called for her alone and handed her a sealed file. Inside were documents that revealed a truth more shocking than any betrayal. She was not who she thought she was at birth. She had been switched, intentionally hidden to protect a legacy. Her real father was a business titan whose fortune had been fragmented after his mysterious death. The chairman revealed that he had been his closest friend and had spent years searching for the lost child. The proof was undeniable: records, DNA evidence, legal confirmations. Her world spun as she realized the family who abused her was never truly hers. They had raised her for money that stopped coming after her father died. And when she became inconvenient, they discarded her without regret. The chairman told her everything had now been legally transferred to her company's properties, assets, trusts totaling more than she could comprehend. She was a billionaire by blood and by destiny. Tears streamed down her face, not from joy, but from the weight of truth and justice colliding. He squeezed her hand and told her it was time for her to reclaim everything, including her dignity and her name. When he passed away days later, the world mourned a legend, unaware that a new one had just risen silently in his shadow. She stood at his funeral, dressed in black, eyes, dry, heart burning with purpose. As cameras flashed and executives whispered, she made a decision she would not hide anymore. The girl they threw out had died long ago. In her place stood a woman with power, vision, and a memory that never forgot. The stage was set, and somewhere far away, the family who once humiliated her lived, comfortably unaware that the storm they created years ago was finally coming for them. Power did not announce itself loudly at first. It moved quietly, like a shadow stretching across the city after sunset. After the funeral, she returned to work, not as an assistant, not as a protege, but as the newly appointed chairwoman. A decision sealed by documents, signatures, and an unbreakable will. The board resisted at first, faces stiff with disbelief and subtle contempt, but she spoke with calm certainty, laying out strategies, projections, and reforms that dismantled their doubts. Piece by piece, by the end of the meeting, silence ruled, and silence meant surrender. She restructured divisions, replaced corrupt executives, and redirected investments toward innovation and ethics. Markets reacted with shock, then admiration, as profits surged beyond expectations. Media outlets scrambled to learn about the mysterious woman who had inherited an empire overnight, yet she gave no interviews, choosing action over headlines. In private moments, memories returned: the cold floor, the slammed door, the laughter behind her back, and those memories fueled her precision. She hired investigators, not out of revenge, but clarity. She wanted every truth documented, every lie exposed. Files grew thick with evidence of how her so-called family had exploited funds, forged papers, and lived off money meant for her protection. She watched footage of her mother spending lavishly, her sister boasting, and her brother gambling away fortunes that were never theirs. Anger rose, but she tempered it with patience. She understood that real karma arrived not through rage, but timing. She changed her name, legally reclaiming her true identity, one that carried history, influence, and weight. Invitations poured in: galas, summits, private meetings with world leaders and industry giants. Each time she entered a room, conversations paused, heads turned, and respect followed. She spoke softly, but people leaned in because power no longer needed volume. Meanwhile, the family who had cast her out felt the ground shifting beneath them. Their businesses failed without warning, loans were denied, accounts frozen, and partners vanished. They blamed luck, economy, fate, never imagining the invisible hand guiding their fall when they finally saw her face on a financial news screen announcing a billion-dollar acquisition. Their blood ran cold. Recognition struck like lightning. Her sister dropped the glass she was holding, her mother sat down pale and shaking, and her brother stared unable to breathe. Fear replaced arrogance as they realized the girl they threw into the street now controlled forces they could not escape. Desperation drove them to search for her, to beg, explain, rewrite history. They sent messages, letters, apologies, dripping with lies, claiming love, confusion, misunderstanding. She read them all without emotion and said nothing. Silence again, but this time it was hers. She arranged a single meeting in a neutral boardroom. Far from the luxury they once enjoyed when they entered, they did not recognize her at first until she spoke their names. The shock on their faces was raw, unforgettable. They cried, pleaded, and blamed each other, but she listened without interruption. The same way she once wished to be heard. When they finished, she stood and told them calmly that forgiveness was a personal journey, but consequences were not. She revealed the evidence, the crimes, the theft, the abandonment. She did not shout, she did not insult, she simply stated facts, and facts were merciless, legal. Actions followed swiftly and lawfully, leaving them with nothing but survival, the same lesson they once forced upon her. As she walked out, she felt no joy, no triumph, only peace. The chapter was closed. Outside the city, lights shimmered, and she breathed deeply, knowing the pain no longer owned her. She returned to her world not as a victim seeking validation, but as a force creating opportunity for others. Like she once was, fate had not just given her wealth, it had given her choice, and she chose to rise beyond revenge into legacy. Freedom changed her in ways power never could. After the confrontation, she felt lighter, as if chains she had carried for years had finally fallen away. She no longer woke from sleep with fear gripping her chest, nor did memories control her decisions. Instead, clarity guided her, and with clarity came vision. She expanded the foundation she had quietly built, transforming it into a global force funding education for abandoned children, shelters for women betrayed by family, and startups led by people society ignored. She saw herself in them all and ensured they would never be discarded the way she once was. Her leadership style became legendary, firm yet compassionate, strategic yet humane. Employees were loyal not because of fear but belief. Investors trusted her not just with money but with futures under her guidance. The empire diversified into technology, healthcare, renewable energy, and finance, reshaping industries while setting ethical standards. Governments sought her counsel, universities studied her methods, and young women around the world whispered her name as proof that pain could become power. One evening, alone in her office overlooking the city, she reflected on the journey. The cold bench, the rain, the slammed door, and realized none of it was wasted. Every tear had sharpened her focus, every betrayal had strengthened her spine. She received a letter that night, handwritten from an unknown address. Inside was a simple thank you from a girl whose education had been saved by her foundation. The words shook her more than any billion-dollar deal because they confirmed her true success. She framed the letter and placed it where she could see it every day. As years passed, her story became legend, but she guarded her privacy, fiercely choosing substance over spectacle. Love eventually found her not in grand gestures but quiet understanding. Someone who admired her strength without needing to tame it together. They built a life grounded in respect, not possession. She never forgot her past, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it fueled a future that lifted others. When people asked her secret, she would smile softly and say nothing, because the truth was simple. She survived. She believed in herself when no one else did, and she never allowed bitterness to steal her humanity. The girl who was once thrown out with nothing had gained everything, not just wealth, but wisdom, peace, and purpose. And far away, those who once humiliated her lived with the knowledge that karma did not arrive loudly, it arrived completely. Time moved forward, but her influence moved faster, reshaping landscapes people once thought unchangeable. She became known not just as a billionaire, but as a silent architect of second chances cities. Transformed under projects, she funded schools rose, where ruins once stood hospitals, replaced slums, and innovation hubs replaced despair. Yet she never put her name on buildings, believing impact mattered more than recognition. She often visited these places without security, without cameras, listening to stories, shaking hands, reminding herself why she began. In boardrooms, she was feared for her precision, but admired for her fairness. She never forgot hunger, and that memory kept greed away. When global crises struck, economies fell, and empires collapsed, hers stood firm because it was built on resilience, not exploitation. Journalists tried endlessly to uncover scandals, but found none, only consistency, discipline, and a woman who refused to be corrupted by excess. One day, an international summit invited her to speak about leadership and legacy. As she stood on stage before thousands, she looked calm, but inside memories stirred. She spoke not of money or success, but of abandonment, betrayal, and the moment she realized survival was a skill anyone could learn. Her words traveled across continents, igniting hope in people who felt invisible. That speech became a turning point, inspiring movements, scholarships, and policies worldwide. That night alone, again, she received news that her former family had lost everything and were living in obscurity. The information brought no satisfaction, only closure. She whispered a quiet prayer for them, not because they deserved it, but because she had healed. Power no longer meant control over others. It meant control over herself. As she gazed at the skyline, she understood her journey was bigger than revenge or redemption. It was transformation. The storm that once destroyed her had become the wind beneath her rise, and she embraced the future not as a survivor, but as a creator of destiny. Legacy was never something she planned. It was something that followed her quietly, shaped by every choice she made after the night she was abandoned. Years later, when she stepped back from daily operations, handing leadership to those she had mentored, the world finally understood the scale of what she built. Not just companies, not just wealth, but a system that turned broken beginnings into powerful RBC. And we look at this. And we all know I've been exploring that. Men, when we all know I've been exploring that path, handing leadership to those seas. As we've said to we, so new while me sedge to us. I like we, will we, tell why we, salive, we to we, tell we, kun to we, kun lice to we at con we see with see we dot we see to we see I with sick we sick course sick I to call like wheel we to see kind with we says sec I can we to see you cute to see you to you we to do could I can you do cute to I can you if you wicked to way you that could do you to see I could we at I we did we this Futures, her foundation, became self-sustaining, her businesses continued to grow ethically, and her influence lived on through people rather than headlines. She spent more time traveling, visiting remote places, listening to stories, offering guidance, and reminding others that their pain was not a dead end, but a doorway in a small ceremony with no media. She established a final trust, ensuring generations of forgotten children would never be without education, shelter, or dignity again. One evening, as the sun set, she sat quietly, remembering the girl who once stood barefoot outside a locked door with nothing but fear and disbelief. She thanked that version of herself for surviving, for not giving up, for walking forward when everything said stop. There was no hatred left, no anger, no need to prove anything. The circle was complete. The family who betrayed her became a footnote, not a scar, and the world that once ignored her now moved in rhythms she helped design. Her story spread from mouth to mouth, not as gossip, but as inspiration, a reminder that karma is patient, that destiny listens, and that the ones who endure quietly often rise the highest. In her final interview, she said one sentence that echoed everywhere they threw me. Away, but fate picked me up, and with that, her story ended, not in revenge, not in sorrow, but in peace, purpose, and a legacy that would outlive time itself. Even after her story was considered complete, ripples of her choices continued to travel far. Beyond her lifetime, years passed, and new leaders rose within the systems she created, each carrying fragments of her philosophy: compassion without weakness, power without cruelty. In universities, her journey was taught not as a fairy tale, but as a case study of resilience, ethics, and long-term vision. Children funded by her trust grew into doctors, engineers, teachers, and innovators, many of them never knowing her face but living inside the future she designed. Some would later stand in the same places she once stood, broken, frightened, and unsure. Yet, unlike her, they would find doors open, hands extended, and paths illuminated because she had rewritten the rules quietly. A book was published, written by those she mentored, filled with lessons she never preached but lived. It spoke of patience as strategy, silence as strength, and kindness as the highest form of authority. On the anniversary of the night she was thrown out, a single light was lit every year in one of her foundations, not as mourning but remembrance of beginnings. Visitors were told the story of a girl who lost everything and chose not to become bitter but better. And somewhere beyond wealth, beyond names, beyond recognition, her presence remained, not as a shadow of pain but as a force of hope, proving that even when the world abandons you, destiny may still be preparing you for something far greater. And so the story closed, not with applause, not with headlines, but with quiet certainty. The girl who had once been betrayed, abandoned, and erased had become something far greater than a billionaire. She became a turning point. Lives she never met changed because she refused to break futures she would never see were secured, because she chose compassion over cruelty. When people spoke of miracles, they no longer meant sudden luck. They meant endurance. They meant the courage to keep walking when the door slams behind you. In the end, her greatest victory was not that those who humiliated her begged or fell, but that she no longer needed their regret. Her heart was free, her purpose fulfilled, and her legacy alive in every child who slept safely, learned fearlessly, and dreamed without limits. The world moved on as it always does, but somewhere in its foundation was the proof that heartbreak can build empires, silence can roar, and karma always remembers. And with that, her journey did not fade. It settled into eternity, complete, unshaken, and perfect.